Eric,
Omar.
this is that episode.
People have been waiting for this one.
They want to hear the hot gossip directly from the two most influential people in the space, standing atop the, some would consider it, and that's what's beautiful. It's open interpretation. It's all about what you personally perceive. Some see a pyramid that is the most accurate representation. Some see a ziggurat that is also an acceptable interpretation. Still others will see something resembling almost like an ivory tower. I personally view it more like the Tower of Orthanc if I had to use one from, Lord of the Rings, because we're ruling, anyways, we could get into it, but it's open interpretation. Nonetheless, the thing that is constant is that we're ruling atop of it. Whatever the structure is, Eric, we are atop of it, hands clasped. I don't have to get into specifics of what we're wearing or not wearing, but we're ruling atop of it together.
I'm a fan. Tower or Think, I'm down.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Black impenetrable tower. Yeah.
That's us. That's us collectively. Eric, folks, this is the episode you've been waiting for. It's gossip. We're going to talk it right down to the people. So we're going to talk about USAPL Nationals. We're going to talk about IPF Worlds. We're going to talk about some controversy surrounding Turkesterone. And we're even going to talk about that fabled ivory tower. Before I get into it, Eric, I got to say.
We're letting the Uruk-hai out, boy. The question I have, though, is which one of us is Saruman and which one of us is Wormtongue?
Oh, damn. No, bro. We are both Saruman and Gandalf if Gandalf joined Saruman. You see what I'm saying? So this is an alternative timeline. Woo! Bro,
that's Sauron, a bad Middle Earth.
Bro, Sauron stands no chance. Imagine we just spend, Eric, the remaining 90 minutes just talking about that hypothetical scenario.
Well, I mean, the question is how does this happen? It would have to been that Gandalf took the ring, because Saruman's already looking in the Palantir. Yeah. He's corrupted.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, Gandalf would have to take the ring and decorrupt Saruman to Sauron and then team up with them against Sauron.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably could have teamed up and then got the Uruk-hai to help the hobbits take the ring, and then they would have turned on the hobbits and then become the dual malevolent dictators of the world.
Hell
Not
yeah.
even benevolent, folks. That's what I'm saying.
No, let us be explicitly clear here. We rule with an iron fist, and Helm's Deep is going to have a whole new meaning. We're not going to get into that. That's for the late night adventures. I want to read some of these sizzling comments though, because I have to say the people, they truly do listen, and our medium of communication has kind of become the YouTube comment section where we have some very either astute observations, hilarious comments. Let me just read a few, okay, sure. Eric, before we go on. This is from our last episode, the one where we spoke about motivation and a lot of other things, but this one just made me laugh, where someone said, whenever I pass out from eating too much spaghetti, my boys simply open up on Spotify, hold that phone to my ear, and as soon as I hear the words, Eric, we got a monster episode, I come to smile and eat more spaghetti. Wow, I read that one wrong. Wow.
that comma was Omar's emphasis to give credit to the listener.
Artistic interpretation, yeah.
Yeah, no. Mom spaghetti. I love it.
And then the guy who we read his comment calling us a cobber, and we didn't know, was that positive?
Yes.
What's the connotation here? Eric, you'd be pleased to know this. I gotta mention on the show, I'm honored and thrilled. Also, cobber is slang for mate in Australia.
Hey, look at the response to that comment.
Oh shit! What did the person say? Didn't know the cobber slang, mate. Thanks. Oh, it was Eric. Oh
yeah,
shit!
It was me. It was me.
Oh shit! I just read the comment and I was like, oh, it's Eric. And then someone said, every single Monday, even clutching to upload at 11 p.m. The boys do not disappoint. And then, come on, Sergey, this is the one I wanted to read for you here, Eric, where Sergey said, with the Gom Jabor, the fantasy and sci-fi book references are getting deeper and deeper. I can't wait to know, I'm going to assume, of Azahoth's split routine.
Oof, yeah. It's a little chaotic.
Yeah, just a little.
You could argue that it's at the center of everything, and that when you do this routine, any dreams you have will create all other routines.
Whoa.
So,
damn.
Yeah, it is the one routine at the center of it all. But, yeah, just don't wake that routine up, bro. Bad stuff.
Eric, I will say this very briefly, that this episode, we could go many different places. Do you want to start with a recap of either IPF Worlds? Because it is, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Eric, some people, there are those that say, I haven't heard them because I don't go on social media. One, because I don't know how to use a phone, because I am a Luddite. But there are people that say we shit on powerlifting too much, that if we were but merely stronger, we would appreciate it more, that it's kind of a fine, it's one of those, you have to take a look, what's one of those hard liquors that the distinguished gentlemen drink, not something lowly like maybe a vodka or something, but like a,
Like a whiskey?
a whiskey. Okay, a whiskey that over time only develops more character. And that would be us if only we lifted more weight. Well, listen up here, folks. We watched IPF Worlds, and there was some sizzling stuff going on. As much as we spoke about in the theoretical context of the greater fitness space, the overall impact of maybe powerlifting diminishing, not being even a bad thing, but just simply that it was new and novel to that space. What's going on in the powerlifting world is exciting. Eric, I want you to kick it off, because I let me take the JB battle. You kick it off with stuff. There's some very exciting things happening, and it's just fun to be able to watch high-level competitors lift again, Yep.
Yeah, and first let me just say, for those who say that we're not strong enough, I want to point out that I'm only 1.5 kilos behind the heaviest deadlift in IPF women's history,
Right.
On my PR. So, yeah, check the stats, folks, okay? That's right, folks. As a 93 kilo male, I'm doing pretty well. No, but dude, it was actually, I will hands down say, besides the ones I've been to in person where I was coaching, this was the most exciting IPF Worlds I've ever watched.
Yeah.
There were upsets, there were newcomers, and there were the tightest battles in some divisions that I have ever seen. So, for example, Leah Bavois unfortunately did not make weight, which was just a big I've kind of shocked everybody. This is someone who's just an absolute dominant champ in her weight class, and I hope people were not so disappointed by that they didn't decide not to watch that division, because it ended up being the most competitive division in IPF Worlds, where all three podium finishers, 1, 2, and 3, had the same total. I think it was 505, if I recall correctly. So body weight determined not whether you were on or off the podium, but everyone on the podium, and whether you got gold, silver, or bronze. And my first thought when I saw that was, wow, that's a great way to get some people some eating disorders right there, is just to lose by 300 grams of body weight or something like that. So I think that was one of the things I want to bring up that was pretty wild.
Well, Eric, you nailed it. It's like, if you knew 300 grams could make the difference, wow. Guess what I'm not having? Breakfast in the morning. I will say, however, that I think one of the things that we had said before as different people, so like Taylor Atwood is a classic example. We went, competed, did his damn thing. I think I read that he had somewhat of a setback and injury, and so he showed up there, got the gold, and I think by some of the ways we've described competing in powerlifting as it relates to maybe weightlifting or strongman and strongwoman, is that it's more set in stone. There's more volatility in those other two sports. In weightlifting, on a snatch, on a clean and jerk, there's just a lot of things going on at once, whereas when it comes to powerlifting, if it is to come down to anything at all, it will be on the deadlifts, and that's not a bad thing, but also because there are certain dominant champs, Taylor Atwood being an example. No offense to any other competitor, but that weight class is kind of on lock. He's the Michael Jordan of his weight class. Nonetheless, when you get that intense battle, so in Leah's weight class is 63 kg, right? And they're competing in it, and everyone's it comes down to the final deadlift. The tension that you feel in that room, because it all culminates into one specific moment, it's electric. I saw that when in 2015 at Boss of Bosses 2, it came down to the final pull between Jeremy Hamilton and Dan Green, because everything rests on that moment. It's incredibly exciting. When it all lines up, it really is electric.
Yeah, and deadlifts, and that was really on display at IPF Worlds this year, with deadlifts playing the heart shaking moments that we saw. I mentioned, that I'm only 1.5 kilos away from that. I was segueing myself. I set myself up here to boost up my own client and our good friend Jess Bittner.
Yeah.
So the 76 kilo class was extremely tight. This is another example of not all three on the podium, but number 1 and 2 both totaled 585 kilos. So going into it, everyone knew it was going to be a big battle between Jess as well as Agata Sitko from Poland. Yep. And what's wild is she's only 19 and she's already an equipped champion.
Yep.
So this was something that everyone was looking forward to. And you could make the argument that it was probably the most exhilarating class to watch. And it was obviously one of the tightest races, as again, it came down to body weight, which Jess had to pull for the win to get. So huge shout out to Jess Bittner. She went 9 for 9, set a world record on squat, and on her second and third attempt, squatted 218.5. Did very well on bench press, and for those who don't know, she was actually dealing with a minor pec strain. So the fact that she was able to still get 105, fantastic. And then to win, she had to pull 261.5. So when she and I sat down, well, I mean, yeah, we were both sitting, but we weren't in the same place. I was in New Zealand. She was in South Africa, and we were talking about, like, let's, final recap, go over the game plan. And first, I just want to say huge shout out to the Canadian coaches who were there on the day. They made excellent attempt calls. And, something I told Jess was like, hey, here's what we think makes sense for our attempts. But look, I'm not going to be there on the day. Really just give it over to these coaches who've been handling you fantastically at last World's Nationals. And they did another fantastic bang-up job this time. So anyway, we kind of put 260 as her top end. So the fact that it was like, I have to pull 261.5, not only is that more than I've ever pulled as Jess, but it's more than any woman has pulled in the IPF to win. It's like, all right, like put up or take silver, and she put up, and it was pretty damn convincing. So some interesting things came out of that. So Jess actually set the squat and the deadlift world record. Agata Sitko at 145 blew away the bench press world
145,
record.
Right?
145, man. At 76 kilo body weight for a woman. It is incredibly strong bench press. So just absolute incredible performers. Interestingly enough, Agata Sitko actually got the world record. So when you think about it, you have to beat a world record.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So because she set the world record first and Jess tied it to win instead of beating it, Agata Sitko got the world record, but Jess got the gold medal. So that just tells you how tight it is when you get the world record and you got silver. Like, how does that work on total,
Eric, there is so much, my man, to recap for that, and I am aware of our time and like kind of the pathway. There's some really interesting things that you brought up I want to get to, not related to IPF Worlds and USAPL Nationals, but damn, we're going to be revisiting this because we're going to have the unit, Jess Bittner, back on. You and myself, Eric, are going to be like, the movie reference is Night at the Roxbury, Steve and Doug Wasabi, where they tell the story of meeting Emilio Estevez outside of a club, and they recount it like 7 or 8 times, and it's a very actually boring story, but they're very enthused to tell the people they're waiting in line with, and it ends with them saying, and he tipped his cap like this, and now it's like basically that they got recognized. But this is an episode we're going to recount about JB. We're going to have her on, and I'm sure we're going to bring it up again. But to me, so the weight classes I was paying attention to, because like some of our athletes for Elemental, Jessica, and then Keiko, so 93 kg men, 76 kg women, Leah, because I know she was competing at 63 kg, wanted to see those. But this was astonishing. So first, I mean, I guess we're going to talk about it then when we have Jessica on, because you're her coach. Like that's a whole avenue right there, Eric. Like that's a podcast right there. So we'll revisit that. But man, I am thrilled for you, for Jess. But what was astounding were a few different things. One, Agata Sitko, when Jess was pulling, one of the kind of videos that went viral, keep in mind, so Jess is a competitor, just set a world record, and Jess is pulling to beat her, and Agata Sitko is rooting for her, and it doesn't seem like one of those like I could be a passive aggressive person. Like if someone's going, it's like, you got, like, Eric, it's like this, like, yeah, okay, like, you got this, right? Like, and you even hear like the venom in the voice, like, let's go. But like, that would be me. With her, like, it seemed like she was totally
Genuine,
committed.
yeah.
And what I love about that is that they brought out the best in each other. And what was so fantastic to see, and I did get goosebumps watching it, which it's been a minute since I watched some powerlifting where that happened, is that Jess rose to the occasion to be a champion. Because that moment, like, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, at least in competition, it was what, at least a 10 kgs over her highest pull in competition, yeah?
Nearly. Yeah, I think she pulled 252.5 at nationals.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's say like almost 10 kgs. She has to pull out
you could even say 9 kgs.
You could if you want to just be accurate over, just say 9 kgs. 10 sounds so much more appealing. Eric.
Almost 10.
Yeah, almost 10. 9, almost 10. That in that moment, it all comes down to that. That's some heavy ass weight. It's like saying whatever, like I'm making up whatever our theoretical max is. You have to reach that and possibly exceed what you anticipated on that day. It all comes down to that moment. You're already fatigued because guess what? You had a brutal battle, like you squatted a world record. All the various things are happening. It comes down to this moment. Can you do it? And there's been numerous instances. I'm not going to point out anyone from this world or actually USAPL Nationals. I could think of one weight class that I think it was within the person's probably a capability, but it's incredibly tough to zone everything in, lock it into one lift, and that is a champion right there. So I saw, and I knew like that's a pure Jessica like unit move. She came out, she had chalk on her face because I think she slapped herself.
She slapped herself.
Hell yeah, that's a signature Jessica move. And she comes up to the bar like she's gonna destroy. That's why I joked. I said you're a Reaper of Souls, and she's like Reaper of Souls, like she said in like exclamation back to me. Or when she walked up to the bar, no hesitation, got set up, and it was like I'm ready to die for that. Like it was probably the most excited I've gotten over a single lift because of the weight of what it meant. And we could get into, we'll continue it, Eric. I'm going to stop here. It is just fun recounting this, man, because we're going to have Jessica and we're going to be Stephen Doug Wasabi recounting our Emilio Estevez story. But what's amazing, we have that whole side conversation of being the champion, you know, Arnold and Pumping Iron, where it talks about the wolf that's hungry, rising to the top, where the wolf that's hungry has a lot more motivation going into it, and the person that it has all the accolades. So then, like, now Jess is a popular figure. She's a social media head. She's sponsored by SBD. Like, all of these things that people kind of want with the journey. She's at the tippity top. Can you maintain that level of discipline and motivation? And when it came down to where you had that new hot prospect coming at you and you had to pull for the win, you did it, and that's why you're the champion 2 times back to back.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible to watch. I woke up at 5 a.m. to watch that class because of the time difference, and there was no way I was going back to sleep after that last pull. I tell you what, I was hyped. So but it wasn't the only time something like that happened at Worlds. So for example, Chance Mitchell, he had to pull 373.5 to win the 93 kilo class by, I think, 1 kilo to beat Emil Krastev, if I recall correctly. And if you watched him, and I mean no disrespect with this, if you watched him at nationals, his third heaviest deadlift that he pulled, which was incredible, I don't think would have passed with the way judging was going this time. So it was by no means a sure thing. You know, he's pulling a world record to win by a kilo, and knowing that this is a very technical deadlift, and nailed it. So that was awesome to see. And I think also Joy Namani, I think she won by half a kilo, and she had to pull a world record of, I want to say was it 228? I think it was 228 to win. So over 500 pounds.
Is it like 4 times? It's like what times by? It's an insane amount.
Well, she's in the 57 kilo class, so it's a ridiculous deadlift. Yeah. So there was a lot of stuff going on like that. And you brought up Taylor. Even though Taylor wasn't at his best, he managed to get gold in all 3, and total. So like he got the gold medal he got 4 gold medals, and the deadlift for him, I think, was more than he had pulled in a while because of his injury. So he pulled 315 for the win, and I think he posted about it recently, but he didn't have like 100% perfect confidence like you would as a healthy Taylor pulling that. So yeah, his dominance is impressive. That even at 90-95%, he is still. The gold medals are his for the taking. So there was some dominating performance, and there was also some very incredibly close performance, and from new folks on the block. So like that was Chance's first time at Worlds, so it was just a really exciting Worlds for those who want to check out replays and read up on it. It was pretty awesome, and it definitely not to be outdone. There was also Mega Nationals going on at the same time, and I want to give a shout out to Bryce Lewis for doing his now his second meet in the 90 kilo class, which is a big cut for him. And he really left nothing on the platform. He almost got his last pull, so he went 8 for 9 and tried to pull 355 if I recall correctly. Didn't quite get it, but totaled I want to say 845, which is he got PBs on the squat, bench, and total at this body weight. So he did a really fantastic job. Good for silver medal. And man, Brandon Petrie is one strong 90 kilo. He's nearly cracking the 900 kilo mark at 90, not 93, which would have been good enough to actually win the 93s, which is crazy to me because that was an incredibly stacked class. The 93s were nuts, man. Chance, Emil, Jonathan Keiko, who got dethroned this year for the first time. And they were all really, really tight. I want to say their good lift points were like within 1 point of one another. So yeah, and Gavin Aiden was not far behind. Gustav Hedlund, there was just an incredibly tight battle in 93. So to be clearly ahead of the pack, it's going to be really interesting in the future if Brandon Petrie decides to go the IPF route, and to see everyone really just kind of have to step up their game, because from 1st to 10th, there's going to be like a 10 kilo spread. So it'll be wild. Yeah.
Eric, I love when you see a lifter set the standard, and I have to give a big shout out to Brett Gibbs, who it was via Johnny Candido that was my window into global level elite competition, those truly at the best. There's just a few things I want to say about that. The first is that Brett Gibbs was a phenom, and when he came on the scene, kind of like an Atwood in 74 kg, it sets the standard where recalibrates everyone's expectation for this weight class, and that's ultimately always a good thing. So we talk about Brandon now, like he's competing 90 in USAPL, it'll be 93 kg in IPF Worlds. Whenever you have a new competitor that pushes everyone else, that could only be a good thing, because I want to get to another weight class in a second. But one of the biggest, Eric, I think, unknowns that would have been exciting, I'm sure you remember this because this man is a participant and observer, avid observer in the sport, the culture, you need to live it, would be healthy Brett Gibbs at 2020 Sheffield, leading up to, do you remember his gym total? It was, I forget the exact total kgs, but Sheffield's going to be something, for those that don't know, that's happening in early 2023, and it's going to, it's going to have a lot of money. It's what I've heard from many people that are competing is they're actually saving their best performances because there's monetary compensation.
Well, here's the thing: is if you break world records, you get money. So if you set a massive world record at a meet prior to that, you're actually, and if you're the favorite, you're making it harder on yourself to make money later. So it's having a really, this isn't something I could have anticipated, to where there is monetary compensation in powerlifting to the point where it's actually impacting the decisions that lifters make. I think previous to this point, it was like, oh, I made some money off this meet. That's wild. Cool. I guess I'm a professional powerlifter,
Yeah.
But it's no one does it for the money. I still don't think people do it for the money, but people are making decisions about the money they can get at Sheffield, the elite few who are in a position to do so, which is a first, where people are literally holding back on the platform to potentially take home a check, next year.
Yeah, Eric, so many different avenues. You tell me when you want to go to the next topic, but I'll say quickly that, do I understand it correctly with Sheffield that one, it's world records get you compensated, but then two, is it also the pay structure? It's organized by, in comparison to how far you exceeded the previous records, is the amount you get paid, or like the ranking of what would be the theoretical rankings to determine the compensation structure for the, is it like the points, like the point system. I thought there's like, because Jessica just said this in passing, that she joked that like, because she set some world records, it's going to be a lot harder now to make money in Sheffield. And so I understand that part immediately about like, now you got to pull, instead of 260, you got to pull like 265 or whatever.
Yeah. So I think the way you can get into Sheffield is there's a base qualifying total of 95% of the current world record total.
Yep.
And then you need to be winning your class at Worlds, or be the only person, or have the highest total from your region that reaches 95% of the world record total. And then there's also one wildcard spot. So that dictates who goes there. And then I think money is awarded just by simply breaking the world record, not by how much. I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me on it. I didn't fact check myself looking that up.
Yeah.
But that is how I understand how the Sheffield's working.
Okay. Yeah, and I want to circle back to our man, Bryce Lewis, because it's fantastic seeing him compete again. I sent him a message because I do like seeing, and this is funny to call Bryce a veteran. Bryce is young. He's like in his mid-30s. But like the idea that he was once again a window for people to see powerlifting on a higher level, right? Where I think I first saw him like maybe 2013, like something like that. It was on someone's YouTube channel, and then his journey competing at Worlds, winning a World Championship, like all those sorts of things. To see people still competing, him, that can't be easy. 15 kg, like 33 pound, weight reduction, all the various factors going in, competing at the highest level, as you said. His competitor Brandon, if he competed 93 kgs, would have won at Worlds. I like seeing lifters that especially had a big impact in the sport still competing. So that was awesome to see.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there was, if you get the opportunity, I think you can at least see quite easily all of these like world record polls and totals. Every time a world record was set, you can find it on the IPF YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And there are replays for all of Mega Nationals. And there were a number of, not the majority of classes, but there were a handful of classes that were just as, if not more competitive, with some people who could have gone on to podium at Worlds at USAPL. So the real interesting question, because for those who don't know, and we have talked about this previously, the USAPL split with the IPF, and now PA, Powerlifting America, is the pathway if you want to go to the IPF. It'll be really interesting to see, with all the competitors who just did very well at Nationals, looking across the aisle and going, you know what, I could have been a world champion, or I could be in the fight for it. How many of them are going to go and then compete in the IPF next year? You know, like, for example, Russ Orhe, Brandon Petrie. There's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just those are the first two top of mind for me. Because essentially what you see is there's been a bit of a dilution in the American lifters. And it's even actually more than that at the world class level. So there's a number of lifters who stayed with Virgin Islands.
Yep.
So like when the split was in the midst of happening and it was preventing some international competition, last year there was no U.S. team at all. There was only the U.S. Virgin Islands team. And we saw a lot of the best lifters went to go lift for, ISV. So some of them stayed. So what we're currently seeing is that the best U.S. lifters are basically split between Virgin Islands, USAPL, and PA. So it's I hate to say it, but powerlifting is starting to become a little like natural bodybuilding, where they want to have more federations and just dilute the talent across multiple different places. But I think right now, as it stands, and I got an inside man at the at like the big national meeting that happened at USAPL Nationals. At least as far as the USAPL is concerned, anyone from PA can compete with them without issue. How that works the other way, if by history and by typical bylaws of the IPF, it's going to be more challenging if you're competing. Like if you start to compete in the IPF, you kind of can't go back without getting like a sanction for a certain amount of time. But people who are currently competing in the USAPL can decide, you know what, I want to go compete at Worlds, and they could come back, but then they wouldn't be able to go back for a while. So I think 2023 might prove to be even more interesting than 2022, despite the fact that this was the most interesting Worlds that I've watched in terms of upsets, tight battles, and just a ton of records that fell. So, it's just the beginning, dude.
Eric, we're very pro-capitalist around here, so I'm an avid supporter of monopolies, and that's why I think there should only be one federation that no one can ever challenge.
One ring, one federation. That's
Thank
what's
you.
up.
Yeah, that's the through thread right there. I will say that surely the fracturing that is occurring. You said natural bodybuilding, man. I remember because I got into watching untested powerlifting. That's the whole origin behind the meat that was called raw unity meat, because there's an issue. This person's competing in Australia, like big dogs or like what have you. Then there's a meet in America, and you never have people clash head to head because this, like we've observed this, that on meet day, like let's say, so hypothetically, Brandon Petrie, if he went to IPF World, let's just say like he competed in the year. What would have happened there with the temp selection? Like you have this person in 93 kg that's just pushing the bear. Like how would, like Chance or like Cake, like it just changes things. Like I think having the best lifters under one roof changes everything entirely. And that's why I'll just say that I do want to see, and I know there's so many factors at play, but I think new talent, and that's maybe what was so exciting with the 76 kg women's battle, is new talent always spurs on increased competition. And that's why I was hoping, because I know there's so Sean Noriega, I'm blanking on who actually finished, Angelo, who finished number 2 in the 83 kg class against Russell Orhe. But it's like, if someone actually pushed, because there's the epic battles before that occurred, like we had Gibbs versus Hack in the 83 kg 2016 or 2018. It was one of those years.
I think it was either 2015 or 2016.
I'm at Eric. You're like, and it was 2017 or it was. I'm like, it was either 2016 or 2018. You're like, yeah. So let's say 2015, 2016. They're epic show.
I could be wrong though.
Yeah, in Texas.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and I remember it was a town in Texas that, like, it wasn't Dallas, it wasn't Houston, it wasn't Austin, it wasn't San Antonio.
Let's just say it wasn't even anywhere that people like. I have heard nothing good about that location from any competitor I've talked to who was there at that Worlds. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to name it because there are people who live there who I'm sure love their town, and let's just say maybe don't repeat that as a location IPF.
Sure. Yeah.
Although I don't have a lot of faith in that because they tried to go back to Belarus.
Yeah, I don't.
And the only thing that stopped it was literally a near World War III situation.
Yeah, they're like,
okay, I guess we won't go there. So
we'll reconsider. Yeah, so I'll say in closing that increased competition is straight up always only a good thing, and that's what was refreshing seeing people on the big stage. And I'm very excited about Sheffield in 2023 because you will, now that there's monetary compensation. Again, being a pro-capitalist here, folks, is that I think we're going to see people come out. I think we're going to see people swinging, and maybe Leah could have been the smartest of them all. With the weight cut, not competing, because
and that is the true storyline is that she this is totally false, by the way.
Yeah.
But what if it comes out again? Not true.
Yeah.
That she purposely missed weight so that she wouldn't have to set any world records.
Yep.
So that she could. Well, actually, the question is she still good to go for Sheffield?
I actually don't. You know what? It was tenuous at best when I started.
Yeah, we shouldn't even be talking about things. No. We're making things up. We don't know it. Brandon, edit this out. Brandon, don't really edit this out. Okay.
Yeah. This is the good sizzle stuff. Eric, before we get into the ivory tower, now with the time that we have and so forth, we're going to go for another 40 minutes or so. Do we want to talk a little bit about Turk, or do we want to just go right into academia?
We are on a roll of just basically gossiping and talking stuff. I think you got to drop the drama on him.
Eric, can I just say this? I feel that this episode is ass backwards because you came to me with an incredibly strong idea for an episode that really we talk about integrity in the scientific community and like the broader implications of social media, all like the tonics that we talk about in iron culture, and we're choosing because we have faith in the listener that they're going to make it past the first 45 minutes of us just being pure like dual Jerry Springers to make it to like the meat. I love it. It's a gamble. Some people would call this a gamble. We know the payoff's going to be there. I'll get into it.
We got timestamps. It's fine now. We've evolved.
We do.
We have timestamps now, folks.
Yeah, we have evolved. You're all right, Eric. So I won't get into this too much because honestly, like the two topics you brought up as it relates to academia, like they're actually really interesting. All I'll say is that recently we had my partner and Eric's colleague Ben Esker on to talk about turkesterone, and so you could go ahead and listen to that episode for the full take on turkesterone, like what it is, ecdysteroid, like the whole breakdown on what this newfangled supplement is that a lot of people were talking about. Hint, they had a lot of monetary incentive in order to talk about it, and a lot of people that were promoting said supplementation used kind of the old disguise of, well, we simply don't know. There's not enough research, the body of research, and that's what was so interesting about Ben having him on to talk about it, because he wanted to talk about the plausible mechanisms and like what would be the pathway then. Okay, you say like there's not enough research, but like what is, from a mechanistic standpoint, like what is this theoretical mechanism that would enable, this supplement? Yeah, magic. Thank you, Eric. Magic. Okay, so that's a separate issue. So that let's have Eric's principle of charity here, and assume that there could be something in turkesterone, which by all intents and purposes, magic is real. Okay, it's illusions that there's something there, which there isn't. They're very likely. Let me correct that. Very, very likely, it seems like there's not. But let's assume that is the case. Okay. The problem, however, Eric, seems like, and I think this warrants a further investigation because it can have much broader implications in terms of the community. And this wouldn't be surprising for someone like yourself, who's been in the space for a long period of time, that a certain supplement not only doesn't pan out, but even shadier than that, Eric, the purported claims in terms of dosing in some of the supplementation that's being sold, so turkesterone that's being sold, is woefully underdosed. And keep in mind, we got Ben on for an episode, but I'll say just quickly that when it comes to testing, of course, it needs to be third party, so it has to be independently done. And there is a range. There actually is a spectrum that one can have in terms of what you claim the dose would be, that it would still fall in an acceptable category. Ben would know the exact amounts, but due to the process of manufacturing supplements, especially when you have a blend that has 5, 6, 7 ingredients, it's not unusual to have a 3% split, a 5%. There is a range. So I should say that. I'm not just talking, and I'm not going to quote the exact amounts because prior to, I didn't look up from the third-party testing for at least two notable brands. I'm not even going to name them because I'll say this: those that sell, you know how they silence the people, Eric. It's a very beautiful way. It's litigation. So if you say anything like out of turn, like you say like a supplement company, and then you say like I believe it was this, I will just say that there's two very notable thought leaders in the turkesterone space that when third-party tested, from what they claimed was the amount, and when I say woefully underdosed, to the point that even theoretically, if turkesterone worked in the amounts that they're dosing and they're selling, it's not only dishonest, but it would not be an amount that would be notable to spur any sort of anabolism or like whatever the claims would be. So not only are you buying junk, you're not even buying the right amount of junk.
So Omar, I thought I knew who you were potentially hinting at but not actually saying to avoid litigation. But then you call them thought leaders? I just got confused because that seems like a really generous category to put at least the people I was thinking of in.
Eric, real quick, will you say that Jerry Springer back in the day, for a certain contingent of the North American, broader world, was a thought leader, was influential in terms of...
I would say he's influential. I think thought leader has a connotation that there's thoughts involved. It seems to that I'm struggling with. So,
very fair. No, and this, the part that's not surprising but tragic is that we've seen this cycle before of certain people, your favorite.
So let me just before you start commenting on this, I just want to make sure because I don't really engage in many things in certain sectors. So, all right. So we've got these folks. They've got popular YouTube channels.
Yep.
And they're making claims and they're saying, "Hey, I've had some amazing gains with this supplement.
Yep.
Yes, I'm selling it, but hey, it's because I believe in it."
Yeah.
And they play the typical card of, "Hey, the scientific research, there isn't much. So we think it probably does work." And by isn't much means there's a little bit that shows it probably doesn't do anything. But that's enough to see this, sow the seeds of doubt, which is often the play. You hang out in the margins and you use people's hopes and dreams and you can sell some supplements. And then also you heavily leverage anecdotes, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And to be fair, ton of people saying, hey, this stuff is awesome. But now we come to find out that all the people who are saying, hey, this stuff is awesome and it's doing great things for me, were taking supplements that had a woefully shortfalled fraction of what the active ingredient was supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess this is a lesson in the power of the placebo effect.
Yep. So there's so many things. Like what is tragic is that you become a piece of propaganda for these influencers by giving your anecdotal experience, which could be highly, it could be something that could outweigh any sort of like logic train or any rationalized argument that someone would be like, okay, like should I take this? It's like, oh, it worked. This person said it worked. Wait a second. It's like, and this person, he does like he's looking better. I mean, surely it must be working. Like the barrier to entry in terms of some of the arguments, they're so low, unfortunately, and the buy-in, and they've shown this when it comes to human behavior. Like it's almost, this is where I say the most anti-capitalist thing, but in an unregulated market, it is up to the participants in said market in order to steer the market in a better, more ethical, let's say for lack of a better phrasing, pathway. But when you are someone that has a position of power, so let's say you're at the top of the proverbial ladder, there's that asymmetry of power and influence where what you say matters a lot more than someone else lower down. And we experienced this over a decade ago. And keep in mind, like, it could have been done better, so on and so forth. But when we talk about like calories in, calories out versus like certain select foods and like what equals weight loss, and like I remember the debates from like 2010 where it was more about who you got more attached to. It wasn't the strength of the arguments. It wasn't the body of research. It wasn't any of the things that an actual argumentation would be settled on. Like the quality of, anyways, you get into it. The part that is actually a little terrifying, Eric, would be the broader implications in that people are siloed into various pockets. So the people that already were suspicious of turkesterone, that were more with it when it comes to either the availability of research, what the arguments for a turkesterone, how weak they were, and how, being a late adopter as in regards to supplementation, as you talked about, Eric, probably the best idea. All those people, it's just justifying what they already like suspected, and so they feel good. The people there, and then there's the middle ground, like always the argument in terms of participating in a said space and engaging with some of these people, and you have to assume they have good faith when they're saying like, I believe in turkesterone, is that you can convert this like theoretical middle ground of people that are kind of on the fence, and I do believe they exist, but I think actually in the fracturing that has occurred on social media, that if this is your guy, like if this is your god, this is your avatar of understanding like fitness or whatever, it really doesn't matter what they say, because you've already bought in so much, and they've shown this with human behavior, that you are more likely, you will die on your sword and you'll change the narrative as opposed to changing your viewpoint. And one thing I will bring up, and this is like,
so is that currently happening? Because again, I don't have my this to me seems like a tough one. Like it seems like it was something that would push a lot of moderates away from it, and it would make it very challenging in terms of the, what's the best way to put it? I guess the like the internal discourse that someone who is a true believer would have. It requires like a lot of mental gymnastics to be like, okay, so the thing that I put my faith in because I believe in this person's experiences, and they pointed out all these quote unquote problems with science, so I'm going to go with what the experience in the trenches are. And then you find out that the supplement doesn't even have what is supposed to be doing the thing that's in it. Like, I don't know. I'm curious. Like, that's got to be a challenge to reconcile, or is it just that it's not people aren't aware of these findings? Are they being well promoted, or what's the deal?
Eric, you're a beautiful, wonderful human. That you believe.
My man just called me naive.
No. I think it's that when people get set in their ways, and we've seen this in many different capacities. And I'm not even like, I joke, but I'm not even trying to get political here. But as an example, there was something that occurred in Canada and other parts of the world during the pandemic where there were like protests against the vaccine mandates and everything else. Fair enough, cool, whatever. But then some people went a step further where objectively, it's incredibly hard for me to understand how you believe you're the good person in this scenario where there were protesters, but there were people that were hurling things, like assaulting, like nurses and doctors that were merely trying to go into hospitals to service the community, to provide life-saving support, either related to COVID or otherwise. So like, emergency surgeries, but the people on the front line, so people that have no political buy-in, that are merely trying to do their job, do a public good, which I think the medical calling, like if anyone knows actual like nurses or doctors or like the sleepless nights that they had or all these things, that they were hurling things at them, assaulting them, like, and that's what, like, they had to be sectioned off. Like, when it reaches that point, and for that, and Eric, they think they're the ones that are with the righteous indignation that they're doing the right thing by like hurting like this 50-year-old woman that's a nurse trying to go into work. Like, it blew my mind. Like, it actually.
So Omar, you're painting. Well, I think we need to have a fair and balanced podcast here. You're painting someone as a 50-year-old nurse who's just doing their job. Well, an alternative truth might be that they are a 50-year-old veteran of the globalist propaganda machine of taking over the world by having people get vaccines. Just want to put that out there as a potential alternative viewpoint.
Eric, so what I love is that because I think in the capacity, what would be the opposing obviously argument to this? As soon as I said they're just doing their job, the person, whenever someone uses the Hitler argument, when you lose
like Hitler.
Hitler, they believe they're just. I'm like, oh, stop! It's like, you know what they did? Like, anyways, I'm not going to go into that whole thing. All I'll say is that it's not surprising to me that people are still tethered to their leader as opposed to questioning their underlying assumptions, because it's easier for them to keep following said person. And there was a notable person in the fitness space that said years ago, and this person, actually I'll just say it out loud because he did pass away, Rich Piana. I remember when he came on the scene, and there was that modicum of truth that people will say, and this is no attack against Rich, but it's like because he's on steroids, Eric, and he says I'm on steroids, it's like a buying. You share a secret with someone, and it immediately builds a certain level of trust. Like he said it, like everyone else doesn't talk. Like The Rock, like I'm not calling out The Rock, but like no one else like says like they're on. He says he's on care. He's believable, and once you have that level of trust, everything else that follows, it's a lot easier to go down the ladder. And he would say things like this, like the things he would say. I'm making up the year now, 2014. Supplements don't work. Supplements don't work. Whole foods are what are important. I'm on gear. I could tell you, gear is amazing. It really works for you. So like those are that's the triangle what he would say. And then it went from that, Eric, in a brilliant kind of Orwellian like pathway, from saying, all animals matter, but some animals matter more than others via Animal Farm. He would say supplements don't work. That's what he used to say. And then he would say whole foods are important. And then it got changed into supplements don't work. Now, when my supplement of Whole Foods come out, and I'm not like, that's not like, Eric, I wish I was
wrong at all.
I wish I was lying. And again, so there's a difference between being in group and out group. So within his audience, they're buying it, right? Within whoever is selling Turkesterone, I think once you've decided this person is, once again, your god, it's incredibly hard to separate. And unfortunately, once someone's popular, I think what I've seen is that in positions of power, that popularity without accountability and without, I also think, empathy for those people believing in it. Because I think the last thing I'll say, Eric, because please, I really want to get into the topics you brought up, man. Because I found them fascinating. Like this,
I just want to hear you talking shit. That's
all. I think we
is that the play now? Like,
I think we need empathy, Eric,
even
for
though
those that
the
believe
dose
in it.
is so low.
Yeah.
It still works this effectively. Oh my God, this is better than we ever thought. Is that the play, or is the play just pretend this is not happening and it's all good?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like a whistleblower, when it came, like, there's that movie with Pacino, The Insider, about the tobacco industry, and how basically there's a huge propaganda machine that downplayed the harmful effects, right? And when you have the theoretical whistleblower, so unfortunately, like, no, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but like there's not probably like any harmful effects with Turkesterone, so it's more like it's bunk. So it's not something that when there is a whistleblower, it'll be notable and it'll make a change. It's more that the next grifting tactic of whatever the next supplement, they'll like put their eggs in that basket. But I think what it is that they would dismiss it. I think if someone who was popular was to bring up, hey, this is bogus, then they would just shift the goalposts a little bit, and then you'd reach that point, which I love in modern argumentation. That's not a point at all. Well, I think we'll just agree to disagree, that we have different viewpoints. I'm like, no, like, It's like climate change. Like, just hold up here, folks. Stop. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I just, I know we're probably preaching to the choir, but
Yeah.
man, you gotta. It's kind of wild when you just kind of watch the chips fall, and for some people it just doesn't move the needle. Like, so the science says it's bad. Well, science is terrible.
Boom.
Okay, so there's no even mechanism for it. Well, why do you think we know everything? Okay,
well, why am
so
I
there's
growing?
nothing
Eric,
in it.
Why am I growing then? If it doesn't work, why am I growing? Like, it literally, you just got to go to the easiest pathway of the belief, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Hey, I mean, if people want to make a religion out of a supplement, more power to them. So.
Well, fortunately, Eric, we know that some of the potential deleterious, harmful effects of social media are completely isolated just to fitness
Nice segue.
influenzas. Thank you, Eric. Surely in the white ivory tower, the beautiful, it stands there. It's not Orthanc, which we're top of. Okay, we're bad dudes. We're top of Orthanc right there with the Urukai. But in the ivory tower of academia, surely social media doesn't influence it at all. It stands pure. It is a thought. It's not a belief. It is a structure that is impenetrable.
That's right.
Yeah.
First off, I love that this episode basically started from me and Omar talking shit to each other about stuff in our lives and our circles, and has now become like, we should just do an episode on that. So yeah, I've been involved in academia for a short time, not a long time, but it's long enough that I've observed some trends, because I also sit in a very, I wouldn't say unique, but I would say a less common position as someone who is not just a science communicator and not just a scientist, and also not someone who's like 80-20, one or the other.
Yeah.
Where, I've done a little bit of publication back during my master's, my PhD, but now I primarily do research reviews and post on social media. Or the scientist who's like, oh man, it really seems to be like impact of my research is more important, and that's the reward mechanisms are moving that way, and I'm in applied research and I want people to understand more about it. Okay, I need to get on my social media game.
Yep.
There's a lot of examples of those two.
Yep.
And there are fewer people who kind of sit smack dab in the middle, and they're more like 40-60, 60-40, 50-50, something like that. And I think that's probably me, if I had to kind of put some numbers to it, because I'm in an active role in academia, and I'm also in a very active role communicating science. But there, of course, are others, and more notable ones, like Brad Schoenfeld as a great example.
Yep.
Andy Galpin,
Yep.
people we've had on the podcast. And others, of course. There's actually a fair amount. I'm not rare. But one thing I have noticed because of the position I'm in is that the applied journals in our space, where folks like myself and others publish, like say the Journal of Strength and Conditioning and the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition, for example, there were a lot of these kind of dual role people sit, and where it is much more important to communicate it. And historically, these journals always had much lower impact factors. And you're probably going, what's an impact factor? Impact factors basically describe how often research in this journal are cited by other journals, and therefore how much circulation they get. Okay. And higher impact factor journals means that other researchers are citing the studies from this research more often. And in our field of exercise and nutrition science, specifically like sports nutrition, typically the highest impact factor journals are like right around 5 or 6. And it doesn't get a whole lot higher than that. There are some notable exceptions where they cross over, the journals themselves cross over into more mainstream science. But if we were to kind of have a relative scaling, so someone from another academic field would be like 5's not that big. But in our field, like 4 to 6 is a big deal. 3, maybe 2 is kind of mid-tier, and then less than that is a relatively low impact factor journal. So Journal of Strength Conditioning Research, JISSN, they were in like the 1 to 2 range for years. And that's because, like when you want to cite the things people cite are like going to be meta-analyses, or they're going to be systematic reviews. They're going to be classic RCTs that really kind of prove a point, because you're trying to write the rationale and you have a limited number of words and citations you can have in your paper. That's changed. So just to give some numbers on it, and I got these pulled up. Journal of Strength Conditioning Research had a 1.5 impact factor in 2016. And now it has a 4.5 in 2021, 4.8 in 2020.
Wow.
And then the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition 2016 had a 2 impact factor, and now it is up to nearly 4. So, sorry, I had those two backwards. So, Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, 2 in 2016, 3.62 in 2021. And then Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition went from 1.5 to nearly 5 in 2021 and 2020. So, those are large shifts for that time period if you were to look historically. And of course, I can't say that the reason why is this, but I think it is because more and more people who are active in that space are on social media. And more importantly, is that the average age of researchers is well, it's not, I don't think it's going down, but new researchers are younger people. They're on social media. And there's this interesting thing that's been going on. I've noticed it for about the last 5 or 6, 7 years, maybe, where people think the definitive publication on a topic is not necessarily the best and well-designed randomized controlled trial, but the one that gets shared by people like me, you know? And if we do a good job and people like me share the thing that is best, great. But if they share the one that they have their name on that's okay, then that becomes seen as the definitive word on a topic.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So it's this interesting creep of expert, you know, like being put on a pedestal over necessarily the quality of the data, and it being heavily influenced by social media. So for example, I think, here's an interesting thing I noticed, and I'm not trying to brag by saying this, but on ResearchGate, which is kind of like Facebook for researchers, I had the most cited and looked at research when I was still a student in my whole, in all of the Sports Performance Research Institute back in like 2013, 2014. And we're talking about some extremely prominent researchers from my field, you know, folks who have been publishing, who have literally almost 1,000 publications and have published game-changing research that set the stage. But Eric Helms, who is in his second year of his PhD with 12 publications or something like that, is having his stuff downloaded and read more often. And that's because I have a public profile. Yeah. It's not necessarily because my research was stellar. I think I'm a good researcher. I think I used to be a mediocre researcher, and I think before that I used to be a poor researcher. I'm not God's gift to research. I'm just someone who has a decent ability to talk and has a public profile. And like most other researchers, I've been trying to get better over time and learn my craft, and I make errors and I do things in ways that I look back and I go, I should have changed that. So there's no, like, my research is put on a pedestal probably for some good reasons, and then some reasons that I wish it wasn't. One is just because I'm a known quantity. The thing that I think is good is that I'm one of few researchers doing research in this space. There's not a whole lot of stuff on like natural bodybuilding and thinking about sustainable careers. So I do think I have an important service to give, but I think there's a lot of people like me who were influencing impact factors now. It's not just like the evidence-based community has a different perspective than the scientific community that's on the same topic. Like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, it would be interesting when I went to a conference and the stuff that the other researchers and myself would talk about, they would be a slightly different set of papers, and we have a different, more nuanced understanding than what was going on in the evidence-based space, which was dominated by like 3 or 4 people, right?
Yep.
And sometimes that was a good thing, sometimes it was a bad thing. If the scientists were maybe a little too mechanistic, didn't have their ear to the ground with the people enough and what was going on in the trenches, they could be off in left field. But likewise, you could have the same thing where people were stuck in a certain interpretation of the data, a certain paradigm. And now those two things are blending a little more. And it is maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing. It's probably, like most things, both. Yeah. But I just find it really interesting that posts on social media are changing the impact factors of journals. At least that's what I think is happening.
Eric, so one, beautiful for you to publicly do this self-flagellation where you're like, you know what, that's what this is really about. No, but this is interesting because it's something I couldn't have anticipated. That social media and those that participate on it are then directly impacting what is most visible and therefore what gets viewed the most. And because there are people that participate on on social media that also use it as an education platform and are also interested in research or getting into research. So then you have that, let's call it like the availability bias of in terms of what you see or who you follow. And then in turn, it's kind of like this feedback loop of people seeing that cited more, and then not them. It's not that they're not doing their due diligence, Eric, but it's that those works then are weighted, therefore, more highly than they potentially should be, given the greater context of the actual research being done on that topic.
Yeah, and there's a lot of examples where this has happened. So, for example, people are probably familiar with the white paper that was written about a lot of Barbalo and colleagues' work. It's resulted in, I think, 3 or 4 retractions now. And some of those papers, which were worthy of getting a retraction, those were like heavily influential because they suggested that, hey, actually a lower volume approach than what we all thought was better. So there are some voices in the evidence-based community who think that's true, and they come by it honestly. They're not trying to be manipulative, and they would like really emphasize that research. And then it comes out that, oh, this is actually fabricated data, and it's now been retracted. Yeah. And it goes to show you that, we're all just humans, people in the evidence-based community, people in the scientific community. And there are potential downsides of being only connected to one or the other, the people talking about science in the social media space, and then the actual scientists themselves. So I guess one potential upside, as you could see, is they're becoming a little more blended. But there are downsides to that. So scientists now are starting to notice the same thing I'm noticing.
Yeah.
If I want to get my paper read, it behooves me to have a famous quote unquote person as on my author list. Yep. Because they're going to share it on their social media, and I'll go from having it being read 5 times to 500 times. And I'm not exaggerating there, just to show you how insulated academia is without the influence of these people who are like myself on social media. And that interacts with the reward mechanisms in the space of academia. So people have probably heard the term publish or perish. So for people who are in academic environments, that is true to some degree, and in some countries and in some institutions, like very true, that you have to be pumping out publications. You have to have a lot of them behind your name to have the chance of going up for tenure or for promotion. And the amount of pay you're getting sometimes is not very high, despite having a PhD. So there is an intense pressure to perform. And it creates this environment where people who find ways to produce a lot of research, not necessarily high quality research, are the ones who are going to rise to the top, not necessarily the best researchers, right?
Yep.
So the benefit of me doing mass every month, where we look at, each month I consider maybe 10 different articles that I might want to review for my article in mass. And then Greg does, Greg and Eric are doing research briefs and writing more articles than me. Mike is writing an additional article to me. So collectively, we're probably looking at triple-digit number of research articles just to go, do I even want to review this one? And then we review it. Largely, that's driven at mass by the topic. Is it interesting and useful to the strength community and the strength and physique community, I should say? And then we go from there. But I can't tell you how many times we dig into the methods or the stats and we're like, ooh, there's an issue here. Rarely is it that there was data fabrication or something like that, or you can't really know just by looking at a paper. But sometimes it is. And the amount that I thought that was rare in 2015, it's still rare in the grand scheme of things in a relative sense, but it's becoming more common. And I think we at Mass, because we're looking at so many research articles a month, this could just be that we're actually looking into this deeper enough to see what was already there. But it certainly seems like the consensus between us is that shoddy ethical and statistical practices and data analysis practices are becoming a little more common in the research. Now, again, I want to just emphasize that it is still incredibly rare, but there are something like 100,000 published articles in our space every month or more, and I'm ballparking it. So there's just a huge amount of publishing that's going on. When you think about every university that has an exercise or nutrition department, in the world, having people publishing, it's a lot. And in environments, certain countries, certain institutions where the publish or perish environment is there, there's a pressure to get things out that have findings, whether they are super accurate or not. And I think that leads to rewarding people who may do things that are counterproductive. So one of the things I've seen, and this is something that I've directly experienced, and I can give a few stories, is I've been contacted by researchers and asked to collaborate on a paper. I had one on Instagram, which just tells you something. So researchers reached out to me on Instagram asking me to collaborate on a scientific paper. My old school ass thinks that's not really appropriate. Like, you should be able to find my AUT address, right? Like, especially if you're a researcher, it's on all the papers where I'm a first author. But you're hitting me up on Instagram, which just goes to show where I am in your perspective, right?
Yeah.
And then they go, hey, we'd like to collaborate on this paper. Are you interested? And my response was, in this instance I'm thinking of, oh, that's a really interesting topic. I'd love to. Can you send me over the methods and what you guys are planning on doing? Like, tell me about the experiment. The response, Omar, was, oh, we already collected it. It's done. We've analyzed it. We just want, to get your thoughts on the paper. So the paper's done. Yeah. What they want is maybe some track changes, some minor additions, enough for me to feel comfortable putting my name on it, so that when they publish it, I can then be like, yay, look what I did. I've got another publication. Everyone should read this so they can get more reads because of that publish-or-perish environment. Now, the messed up thing, though, is I know a lot of researchers who don't even think there's anything wrong with that. Like, this isn't a secretive backdoor thing. This is unfortunately becoming more and more status quo.
Yep.
Like, if you look at the history of scientific publication, Omar, back in the day, 1, 2, 3 authors, 90% of papers.
Yep.
Now, I can't tell you how often the APA formatting, where it allows you to have 6 authors in your reference list, and then it cuts off the last one and just says et al., is coming up. Like, there's more than 6 authors on so many papers. Oh, did you come in for a 1RM test? You're an author on this paper. Oh, did you provide track changes and you've never actually looked at the data? You're an author on this paper. While that is changing, and I understand why, because there's a publish-or-perish environment, and sometimes I don't have an issue with it. So, for example, if you are putting on master's students who are trying to build their CV and try to exist in academia, you throw them a bone if they're on the methods, if they're a part of a paper. That is potentially teaching them bad habits as they go later as to what constitutes being an author, but at least it's for a good reason. You're trying to help out that student, right?
Yeah.
So I understand the motivation behind it, but real quick, I'm going to pull up the actual guidelines from the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. And these are what they recommend for authorship to be based upon, 4 criteria.
Okay.
Substantial contributions to the conception or design of the work, or the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data for the work. And number 2, drafting the work or revising it critically for important intellectual content. And number 3, final approval of the version to be published. And number 4, agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work and ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity or any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. So does that line up with hitting up Eric Helms on Instagram and asking him to give you track changes on already completed, conceptualized, finished, analyzed work without giving him the raw data and being like, hey, please share this?
No.
Absolutely not. I'll answer it for you.
Yeah.
And I have had colleagues who have not known that they were on a paper until the journal asked them to sign off on it.
Yep.
So basically, the last one, final approval of the version to be published. Nope.
Yeah.
And the issue here, it's not just me like wagging my finger at my colleagues. I am doing that a little bit, and I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
It's also to protect my colleagues here, because when this is seen as is okay to just read over a manuscript, help them with their wording, make them aware they should have cited something different here, or ask them to be more specific about their methods, and you're just good faith assuming that they collected data properly. That 4th point, agreement to be accountable for all aspects of it. When your ass's name is on the next paper that gets included in the next retraction, it makes you look bad. It potentially even opens you up to issues, So the white paper that I was talking about, it actually had some people who wrote it who were authors on some of these papers, because they actually noticed, oh shoot, like I jumped in on this publication and the data look like they're fabricated. So it is literally has happened and is happening that people who are having really shoddy research practices are reaching out to people because they have reach and they have influence and asking them to be an author with me. And it might come back that, oh, guess what? your name, and you're the most prominent person on this paper. It might even be like Smith is the first name, but Helms is the third author. Think of the Helms paper. I've seen papers where you're not the first or last author, which is typically the first and senior author position, referred to as your name's paper because you're famous, quote unquote, in our space. And now that paper gets retracted. Now that paper is being acknowledged as potentially fabricated, or at least really poorly done. So I'm saying this is a direct, mention to all my colleagues. Be more careful. Like, think about these criteria, because it not only are you potentially signing off and making poor work much more popular, but you're also potentially hurting yourself and your own reputation. So yeah, for me, the way I operate now, Omar, and I didn't always operate this way because I wasn't really aware of all the stuff. When something is the status quo, it's very difficult to even notice the problem in the first place.
Yes.
Because of mass directly related to it and seeing this happen multiple times, it made me think back to every time that I've said, yeah, I'd love to participate on this, when I wasn't, if I hadn't met the team, they hadn't talked through the methods, and I didn't know the people involved, and I hadn't seen the data. That is what it requires for me to be on a paper now. So I am on papers with teams where I'm not part of the data collection. And you notice the criteria doesn't require that you're there for data collection, but you do have to be part of concept or design and analysis, drafting the work critically. Again, you didn't have to create the study, collect the data, analyze it, and sign off on it, but you have to have been a part of the draft at all steps of the way, at least conceptually. And so that's how I operate now. So I do have collaborations with people in other countries where I'm not in the lab, but I met them, I helped them, I talked through the methods and gave my feedback on it, and I revised the data when possible with the individual level participant data. That's not always ethically able to be shared, but at the very least, looking at the group level data, giving my thoughts on analysis, asking questions, and then when I put my name on it, I know that I am equally responsible as they are for the accuracy of that. And if I'm not comfortable doing that, then I won't be an author on a paper.
Gosh, Eric, there's so much to talk about. I know we have limited time. 2 minutes.
Can I share one more shitty story?
Go.
Just to give you an example of how bad it's got with the whole publish or perish environment. Okay.
Yeah.
So the way things are supposed to be is that there's supposed to be this movement towards open science, to where we want to share more data, we want to have transparency, we want to get more things open access so that there can be more collaborative learning and a exponential growth in knowledge. And that is happening. And I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but when that also interacts with the publish or perish environment, you can get pushed and pulled in two different directions. So one of my students, we've had on, soon to be Dr. Yukic, great guy. He and I worked on a meta-analysis together, and I'm not going to say which one, because I think it could potentially figure out what we're talking about. But we've worked on a number of meta-analyses. So if people really want to go through the dirt, they can probably figure out which one I'm talking about. But what you do when you get a meta-analysis is you extract all the data for all the different studies that are included in that meta-analysis to make a pooled analysis. Often, there's at least a handful of the papers that you're trying to get the data from where not all of the data is reported in a way that allows you to meta-analyze it with the most statistical rigor. So you reach out to those authors and you say, hey, I was wondering if you could send me your data. And that's a key principal part of open science, is sharing data. Sometimes you're limited in your ability to share data by the ethics. Typically at best, or typically most of the time, if you de-identify the data, you can send it to them just with non-named, just subject coded, which should be the way you save your data anyway, but not always. This was not one of those cases where the person did not want to share the data because of ethical reasons. They said in more or less words, I can share this data with you. However, I have some colleagues who are also publishing a similar meta-analysis, and I want theirs to get published and cited and seen so we can, bring more accolades to our group. So I prefer not to share the data unless I am made an author.
Oof.
So if you make me an author on the paper, I'll share the data with you, which of course completely goes against the ICMJE, criteria that I mentioned. Yeah. You didn't even know this is going to get published until you got contacted by the authors of the paper who are trying to get it done. And it's basically blackmail, for ethics. it's highly unethical. And long story short, we never got that data, you know, because obviously we're not going to make this person an author. Yeah. But it wasn't. It was worded in such a way that this seemed normal to them.
Yeah.
You know, like this is a zero-sum game. You know. And that is not the way we want science to be operating. And this, to be fair to the listener who might be freaking out when they hear this, this surprised me. This made me livid. It surprised me because it is not the way it's supposed to operate. It's not the way it operates in most cases. But in some environments, for some people, at surprisingly influential levels of academia, it is norm. It is the norm. But it's not the norm broadly. So there are places where this does occur, and that's not good. So yeah.
Eric, I have so much to say. I am aware of our time. Is it time for me to wrap it up?
No, we're good. We can go over a little bit. That's all good.
Okay, awesome, man. Because I'll say this is actually blowing my mind, because you told me offhand before we started the podcast some of these topics, what you want to talk about. But when we talk about not only being unethical, like major ethical violations here, the sanctity of the ivory tower is being questioned, in the sense that, like, let me just make sure that I'm getting this right. That one, so publish or perish. There's an incentive in order for people to publish works. Two, there's also an incentive, correct me if I'm wrong, to publish works that are notable, so they have some sort of finding in it. So
impact.
Yeah, so you already have two things influencing either what you choose to research or how you choose to participate. And then third thing, am I also getting this correct, Eric? If something is more notable, not because of the actual impact, but if we define that impact in terms of the amount of times it gets shared. So what you said, instead of 5 views or 500 views, that provides an incentive for them in order to participate more. Like basically like the university or institution, it's seen as ultimately a good thing if a paper gets read more, correct? Is that just before
That's
I go
all
on?
accurate.
Okay,
and
cool.
This is no, I will just say, because I don't want this to actually poison the well, that this is all happening at the same time as there being a push for more open science and more transparency. I'm aware of a lot of these issues because there is more transparency, and open science is a thing. It is conflicting with the publish or perish environment, as the story example I gave. But the positive aspect of things being shared on social media, you know, the people fight about this stuff. This is not new on Twitter, you know, and get called out. So that's ugly, and it is potentially, you know, like creating drama. But I think it is also shining a spotlight on a lot of these things. So the fact that there is more engagement and effect from social media with the Ivory Tower and transparency, it's bringing this to light. This isn't necessarily to say, oh, and now science is trash, but this is good because now it's obvious, we can talk about it, we can express these issues, and it will make science better.
Yeah. And Eric, I will say that I think when these institutions came up with these policies or incentives, no one could have anticipated the impact, one, the invention of social media, how it arose, and then also its overall impact. As you also alluded to, however, these things have been occurring before social media. And when you said there's like a few, like let's say like a few authors that publish a large amount of research that, you know, inside of the institutions already, there is some sort of incentive structure for this. I think what is interesting, I'll say overall about this conversation and like where it could go and whatnot, is that it all depends upon the participants in any space. We're now talking about academia. If it is more open access, open science, open availability, and you can have these conversations, not that you're shaming other potential people from doing these long-standing traditions, but at least
I am. Yeah. I really think they should change.
Clear. For sure. But like as you said, it's super interesting, man, because you said before, like when it's an accepted norm, you have to stand outside of it in order to say, like, well, why is this a problem? And it's interesting to me because we do like the Ivory Tower. That's why we joke. You hold it up to a higher standard than something like the fitness space or like whatever. So when you see certain mechanisms being enacted that could be either a harmful, but B, also not in the service of the public good, which I think is like kind of the inherent assumption with some of the research or whatnot. And then that question's not, like the broader up, like is this research, is this work shoddy, but just like, the actual participation of some people, like why they do it, and the quality potential of the work. To your point, it seems exceptionally low, like some of the things like the fabrications or like what comes up. I think it's notable because it seems surprising in the space, but by having these conversations or bringing it to light, I think that's where you can have transformative change, because it's something that like just to be very clear here, man, if you see an author or someone choosing to be an author on a certain amount of papers, and then like all your colleagues, like let's say you're bringing this to attention, other people are, and it's now a known thing, like, it's not only like a faux pas, you shouldn't do it, but also it's once again not in service of the public good. In some cases, like being ostracized or being, called out indirectly can be a good thing. It's like, hey, like, do you think this is the best practice? You might be used to operating in this way, but that is where you have the open forum, the possibility of change.
Absolutely. And man, it's gotten to the point where like the people who would get hired have way more publications than the rest of their peers, and because they're assumed to be the most productive and most effective researchers. And I actually now think the opposite. When someone has far more publications than everyone else, I think they've got to be cutting some major corners to get there. And I am actually immediately skeptical of the veracity of their findings or their actual involvement in those publications.
Man, Eric, that did blow my mind when you brought it up. Only because there are some like in terms of accountability and like structures. And to your point, it's by having open science that the possibility of having then these conversations and seeing kind of like some of okay, so like what is this, like publish repairs, like why is this actually occurring? It's going to be interesting to see long term some of the impact on social media, as once again, like one of the pathways. I don't think it's like really going to be something a lot of people do, Eric, but it's like what would you call it? Let's call it like the rock star researcher. Does that make sense? Where someone like you publish something and like it actually, you know what? That is, we'll end it because I know, man, I'm aware of the time. But outside of the fitness space, I won't name names, but like let's just say someone who appears on, I believe his name is Joe Rogan, but let's say some notable people that are like they're researchers and they publish like some work that is either like it's very provocative or whatnot, and they become the rock star researcher, where that becomes their moniker, and because they are like loosely tethered to academia, the weight of what they're claiming instantly goes up. And so I don't really think we've seen that to that level in the fitness space, but I could only shudder to imagine the greater conversation of this, because it doesn't just occur like the intersection of social media and academia doesn't just occur in fitness.
No, it doesn't at all. And it is, I don't have enough experience outside of my little space, but with what I see here, I would be surprised if it isn't occurring in other flavors and other fields.
Eric, we've reached the end. Okay, we saved the juiciest of gossip, the one in the ivory tower, for last. This is just we're just in that soup. We're in that gossip. We're just stirring it up. We're stirring a little trouble up here, Eric. Can't wait for that small town in Texas to come after us. After we both agree, don't go back there, IPF. Just don't do it. Is there anything you want to say in closing?
No, I just I hope people know that the intentions behind all this is to point out things that hopefully improve moving forward, rather than to just gossip for gossip's sake.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, Eric, to echo that in closing, should you live in that town, maybe move then, because like when you live in it, you think, like, to Eric's point, you have to think outside of
my point. I love it.
You have to think outside of yourself. Like, you think it's enjoyable to live there, but if every tourist that visits your town get sad, like maybe what you've accepted as being normal isn't normal,
Unless you just don't want tourists around, then stay.
Maybe it is a good deterrent. So I will say, I want to thank everyone for listening to another episode of Iron Culture. I appreciate everyone leaving their comments. There are some very interesting ones that are very funny, so we thank you for that. You can also go ahead and leave a rating and review on iTunes. Typically people leave 5 stars. We'll leave it up to your own discretion. This isn't a publish or perish, so it's not a review or die scenario. We leave it up to you, but we appreciate you nonetheless, and we'll catch you every single episode on Monday from now until the end of time.